Thank you, Councilmember Thorpe.
Okay, here we go. Arnie, the clicker. Click. All right, so this is kind of our official report out for the Antioch Youth Services Task Force. And I have to say, I think we have 100 slides because we wanted to beat the Chief of Police from his presentation of 80 slides. So hold on to your seats. I'm lying, there's about 10 or 12. So which button do I hit? Left or right? Right. Okay. So this idea came out of in response to Measure W passing. So the City Council established a task force to explore youth opportunities here, youth programming opportunities for the city. Earlier in our budget discussions, some folks alluded to the fact that it was just for police and code enforcement. That's inaccurate. It was, we were pretty clear. We even had commercials about how we were going to support youth programming. And it talked about children talking about help us reach our potential. So anyone who says otherwise is not telling the entire truth. The city overwhelmingly passed Measure W because of public safety, youth programming, quality of life, quality water, etc. So this is where our ad hoc. Our approach was unconventional in that we did panels, workshops, and roundtables as a way to give folks an opportunity to kind of care about what we were doing. But it was a simple way to really capture residents' opinions in a collective fashion. And it was pretty meaningful because we had the opportunity to engage with folks one-on-one. So we enjoyed it. We had one meeting where it was all panels, all days, thanks to the support of Director Nancy Kaiser and our city manager. We had a few panels. One included an overview of youth programming that currently exists in our city from Nancy Kaiser, Boys and Girls Club, and the school district. So it was great to have them participate. We had a panel of faith leaders. We also had a panel of educators from our Antioch Unified School District, and we ended the day with a panel of law enforcement. So we had the district attorney's office and our gang unit here from the city. And then we had a workshop where we had over 40 youth show up at the Nick Rodriguez Center. We had about 20-something parents and other educators, and then just the community in general who participated in that. So we're pretty thrilled at the turnout and excitement around youth programming in our community. It really definitely showed that this is top of mind for a lot of folks and residents in our community. So what currently exists, we found, these are just some quick takeaways from what we learned from our Parks and Recs director. Childhood obesity is off the charts in Antioch. So she looks at that from a recreational standpoint. We are the highest population of people that are under the age of 18 in Contra Costa County, but we're also one of the largest youth employers in the area. AUSD is focused on K through 12, but they do some limited after-school programming. We also saw the need for, the school district sees a huge need for social, emotional youth development programs. And they're seeing on their end that underserved youth, the population of underserved youth in our community continues to grow. We also had a roundtable with local CBOs and local community-based organizations. Thank you, Arnie. So we heard from them as well. It was kind of, and the mayor will get more into some of that discussion. So they did some quick highlights where there was need for collaboration, focus at at-risk youth, and that we have a limited number of CBOs in the community that are currently working with youth. So what is is this where you take it? What is Parks and Recs doing? Currently, we run 4 summer. This is as it relates to youth programming. That's in the summer. They run 4 summer programs. They have the aquatics camps, which are limited. We have outdoor and specialty camps, which are very, very limited because those could be up from anywhere between 6 to 10 youth. And then we have Coyote Hills Summer Day Camp, and that one you can go through the entire summer In that program, they last a week, but there's 15 of those. It gets you through the entire summer, but we only have about, I believe, 36 slots, 46 slots in the Camp Hills Day program. And then we have the Summer Preschool Academy that is limited. There is a huge need for preschool throughout our county, throughout the county, but specifically in the city of Antioch. And what Nancy talked about in her presentation to us was supported by some of the work that First Five Contra Costa does around kindergarten readiness. They see wait lists nonstop. We have enrichment courses, and I think this is where people get confused about youth programming overall. They look at our recreational guide and say, look at all these courses. And so we focus on art, music, dance and music, fitness, aquatics, including kayaking, online driver's ed for our high school students. These are very specific, very limited, and limited in terms of time, because an art class can be every Thursday for like about 4 weeks, and it's from like 4 to 6. This is just 4 to 5. This is just as an example of what some of the courses that we offer look like. Youth sports, we did not get into youth sports, but the Parks and Recreation does offer certain youth sports activities. They have sports camps, open gym, limited, tennis lessons, and junior giants. And remember, all this, everything on here comes at a if you open the recreation guide, it comes at a pretty significant cost. So that's what's going on in Parks and Recs at Antioch Unified School District. This is our summer programs. This just gives you an outline of the summer programs specifically that we offer, that I talked about. Antioch Unified School District has 111. It should have been 123. My apologies. They offer 3 programs: ACEs, Assets, and some additional programming that's the summer school academic intervention for children who are failing courses or need to catch up credit-wise. And they do some very, very limited after-school programs. So ACEs is based on social-emotional support. They have them at 6 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. They serve 60 kids per site, and it's from after school to 6 p.m. Every program has a wait list. And again, social-emotional support, so it's all about how to, not necessarily home tutoring or anything. It's how to prepare for, to do your homework, how to prepare for certain skills or life skills. And it's based on free and reduced lunch program. So not everyone can participate. These are what we call Title I schools. Most of these, as a matter of fact, most of these programs in the ACEs are in North or Southwest Antioch. Southeast Antioch does not have anything remotely close. And then there's Assets. They only run one, and it's at Antioch High School, and this one focuses on academic achievement. They serve up to 108 kids, and they have different programs within Assets that focus on academic achievement, but also on some of the social-emotional support and some of the school clubs. So back in our day, clubs just were kind of a standalone thing. Now they're included in this Assets. So that's what the Antioch Unified School District is doing. ACEs is funded through the state. Assets, it's funded through a federal grant, and they're, I believe, on their 5th award, I believe they're on their 5th award. So an example of some of the limited after-school programs that they offer. This is the principal of Phyllis James, principal of Black Diamond Middle School. While she has limited after-school programming that's funded through the districts that runs Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for 1 hour, limited space, and then there's a wait list. But she also has the good fortune of benefiting from the Pell program. So the police department has been very supportive through some youth sports, as well as the women's empowerment, not to be confused with the girl power movement. That has been led by Sal Sobrani through the Rotary Club. So there are some other opportunities that some of these schools get, but Principal James did talk about how most of her students, all 400 of her students, their parents just work far. They don't get back on time. It's very difficult to engage parents, and it's not because they're bad parents. It's not because they don't care, as many people like to make you believe. It's because they're working. And it's very difficult to take the day off when you work in San Francisco or Oakland to come volunteer at your child's school. It's somewhat unfair, but it's the reality of the situation. And so as a result of that, there are systemic challenges within her school. So they're working pretty diligently to refocus Black Diamond Middle School, and it's going through a transformation right now. So we also, again, talked to community-based organizations. YWCA, they have state preschool here at our YWCA. They serve about 150 students. They have wait list. And they also offer mental health services. Antioch First Five, they serve here at this Antioch First Five Center, across the street from where we're at, they serve about 1,000 individuals. So this is parents and children, 0 to 5. And they focus on family support, early intervention, child development, and they also have wait lists. Safe Return Project, we didn't put anything up there because it's still too soon. They just literally moved into Pittsburgh, but they will be serving the Antioch community. So nothing to report yet. We have the good fortune of having One Day at a Time, which is a youth program that serves between 200 and 250 participants. It's based in Brentwood, but they do support the Antioch community, and they're in schools in our communities. So that 200 to 250 participants, part of that is Antioch. It's not all of Antioch, and it's school-based, and it's 36 weeks. We heard from REACH, which works directly with our police department. They focus on behavioral health for children between 11 and 17 years old. Their programs range from 3 to 6 months to anywhere from a whole year. And so they also service kids at the Byron's Boys Ranch, and they specifically service children there that are from Antioch. They, when we talked and did the roundtable, they talked about the total number of participants for their whole program, and they work throughout the county. We didn't get a number specifically for Antioch because they just didn't have that in front of them, but we can always, just to give you an idea of what's happening. And then Galaxy Kids is a private LLC that does some youth-based coding. They serve 75 Antioch participants. They also have a wait list. It's a 12-week program. Again, it's school-based. They're right now somewhat being funded by Antioch School District, so that's where their students come from. But their budget was recently cut by the Antioch Unified School District by $10,000, so they're taking a big hit. So these are the CBOs. There were 3 that we considered CBOs that did not get to participate on our roundtable, and that was Beat the Streets, who's located in Sycamore. We considered the library as a CBO because you guys do some limited after-school programming that serve Antioch High School students, and I'm missing one. Or maybe it was just those 2. I'm not missing one. Okay, good. So those are the CBOs. Mayor?
Yeah, we had 3 different meetings. The first one was that panel meeting where we heard from faith-based organizations. We had another panel. The DA's office, the police department was represented. We also heard from the schools and administrators. And so we had that. We had our second meeting was with the youth, and our third meeting was with the CBOs. And if you look at this, one of the things that we found out was that there are not a lot of community-based organizations that serve the youth of our community. And so we see that as a whole, something that we need to work on. And when we got together, again, the library was invited, so they're not on here, but they were invited. Yeah, that's, just don't yell at us. But we did want as many people there participating. Well, the great part of that meeting was these organizations were all in the room with us together to be able to sit and have really a robust conversation about them serving youth and what the needs that they saw were. And one of the things that came out of that was just being in the room together they loved. They loved the opportunity to be together with other community-based organizations to be able to talk about the youth and what they could do. It was a great conversation. One of the questions that I asked them at the end of the meeting was, if you could do one thing in our community to support our youth, what would it be? And the answer resoundingly from all of them was to create drop-in centers in our community, a place for youth to be able to go to. Right now, we just don't have enough of those places from 3 to 6 for our youth to go to. They do not feel welcome right now at our community center. We heard that as well, that they don't feel welcome there to be able to go in and just hang out, and that they wanted that kind of a drop-in center. And so, interesting, some of the things. The faith-based leaders, what we heard from the faith-based leaders was the students just needed a place to hang out. They were opening their churches, they were doing all that they can, but the resounding thing was that the students really wanted a place, that kind of drop-in center. So here we heard it from the faith-based as well as the CBOs, that they wanted that kind of thing, a place that they could go and relax and have fun after school. And then they talked about creating relationships, that there had to be, at these drop-in centers, there had to be cultural competency. There had to be somebody at these drop-in centers that related to the youth, that the youth felt like, I could see myself in this person, and they could relate to them and really create relationships. That was the overwhelming feeling that we got from the 4 different churches that were there represented. And each of them were doing some wonderful things on their own, but suggested that these were things that were needed in our community. Law enforcement, we were able to hear from the 2 members of our police department, and they really were talking about gangs in our community. Right now, we don't really have a gang unit in our police department. We have members of our police department that in their free time work on the gang unit. And they're doing some wonderful work. We have 11 officers that participate in there right now. And they went through and described what's going on and what they're doing and the great work that they've done over time. And when I got done with them and I asked, what would be the goal? What would you like to see in our community? And they talked about 2 things. They said one would be a full-time proactive unit, right? So that it's not just the ones that are in their free time trying to do this, trying to get this in, but somebody whose full-time was really working on gang and working with youth and preventative work with youth. And the other thing was school resource officers. That we haven't had those in a long time, and it could almost be, they were saying it could almost be that, proactive unit could be work with the school resource as a school resource officer during the day. Just things that they suggested that we heard from them. We also heard from the DA's office, and the DA's office really talked about truancy. Truancy is labeled as over 10% absenteeism. So if, in a month's time, if there's 20 days of school, if you miss more than 2, that's considered truancy, which sounds like a little, but it affects their education, it affects their ability to go forward, it affects the amount of money that we receive for those students. And Antioch has the highest truancy in Contra Costa County. 40 to 46% of our students in Antioch K through 12 are considered truant. And so that's causing issues with the students, because what they see is with truancy, there's those students end up being poorer students that don't do as well in school. They end up being the ones that end up getting into more trouble in the community. And so half of the cases, they have a parent truancy court where once a parent or their kids get into truancy, they have a parent truancy court. Half of the cases that they help in Contra Costa County in parent truancy court come from Antioch. And so we have a huge problem when it comes to our community and the youth of our community, and we need to support those youth. It was loud and clear. Some of the suggestions that they made were team for most truant students. So creating a team that would help those truant students, especially the ones that are most truant. That team would do home visits, trying to work with the parents to get them to understand the importance of going to school and those things. And they discussed a Colorado program that has been very successful that we might want to look at and model. So that was law enforcement. The educators, we heard from Phyllis James, which I think Councilmember Thorpe talked a lot about what she had to say. I'll just highlight on most of her students, she said, are latchkey kids, right? Their parents go off to work. They don't get home till 6 or 7. They are on their own after school with keys to go home or do whatever else they're going to do. And so how are we serving those youth after school? She suggested dances, art, coding, adulting 101, poetry club, yoga are things that are being very successful on her campus, getting youth to stick around and participate. And then the parents, we heard from the parents in the last the meeting we had with the youth, and parents. And one of the things that the parents, I heard from the parents was that ability to be able to utilize our campuses, to be able to have those places for our youth to be able to go to. The youth were very much in their focus group. The youth talked about wanting to be accepted, wanting to feel safe in our community, wanting to have that place where they could go and relax and hang out. We heard over and over again that kind of drop-in center place where they felt comfortable going to after school. And so the other was CBOs. We talked to Michael Dunn of the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club. He talked about his program. We talked about potentially partnerships with those kinds of CBOs to be able to bring that kind of a drop-in center into our community. And so those were the things that we talked about. This was the youth and their discussion.
Yeah. That's a video. Isn't that working? We did report outs, and so the youth, I thought I did the video of the youth, and so they were going to just do their report out, but I think you captured it nicely. We don't have to go through the video. I didn't really know where we were going to go with this, other than we knew we needed to look into youth programs. I think maybe some folks thought that we were going to come back with a list of programs that we were going to implement. We're looking at it from a higher level perspective, and so one of the things this council did was really affirm the direction we were going in by allowing us to put together the youth network manager position from the one-time funds that will go on and take some of the recommendations that we've come up with. Our idea was to come back with the job description, but after talking to the city manager, he said, well, that's our job. And so you're right, that is staff's job, so we don't want to get in the middle of that. We did come up with some recommendations, kind of a scope of work of what we want our youth network manager to be focused on in next year. And so there are 15 recommendations. So, I was as I was listening to some of the comments earlier during our work study session, during our budget work session, I wish some of those folks would have stayed, because there was an assumption that we were just haphazardly coming up with anything or this broad, but we're very specific. We want to develop, number one, a youth services network collaborative that includes, of course, a database, memorandums of understanding of public, private agencies, nonprofits, CBOs that serve our youth and families. We want to work with the network to identify service gaps, redundancy, opportunities for growth, etc. Explore appropriate models of quality youth services. And I was in the parent group, and parents emphasized quality. They just don't want the drop-in center to be a place where you just drop in and do whatever you want. They want structured activities that are academically based and that have a focus on social-emotional development. And so quality youth programs and prospective contractors, i.e. drop-in centers, Youth Uprising, Boys and Girls Club Rise Center. So these are just some of the examples that we thought we could look at as models. Special focus on early gang intervention programs for kids most at risk, roughly in 6th and 7th grade. Develop and launch ongoing programs, classes, events for children K through 6 and teens 7 through 8. Work with area youth groups, Antioch Council teams, our LCAP at the schools, etc., to develop ongoing programs. Review the city's programming and communications efforts to determine how to better serve youth and parents if needed. So they'll examine some of the things that we currently do in Parks and Recs and maybe through our REACH program. Inventory current city facilities, city parks, etc., to determine if appropriate to house and deliver youth programming, and provide, of course, strategic guidance to the city manager, and periodic updates to the Youth Services Task Force and City Council in the implementation and progress of the network. Identify funding costs and prospective philanthropic opportunities outside of Antioch. There's a lot of opportunities, and I'm sure my friend from the Richmond Community Foundation knows that there's a lot of potential outside funding that can come in to support youth programming. But what we believe is that it's better as a collective group instead of just the city of Antioch. And so the CBOs are going to be critically important as we identify needs. Review transportation came up for every group. Transportation is a challenge in this community. So we want to review transportation options, including local transit providers. That's inherent in the network, but we wanted to call it out here because it came up every meeting we had. Review current youth employment opportunities with the city to build a youth employment program. And what we want to examine is what Nancy Kaiser is doing in Parks and Recreation and see how we can expand that in other areas in departments that focus on 21st century workforce skills. And there's some examples up in Sacramento that we can look at. Identify areas of youth development as it relates to civic engagement participation. Examine the possibility of Parent Resource Center. Parents seem confused as to what is happening in this city, and they seem confused as to what a recreational guide was, so we're clearly not communicating to parents. So there's much work to be done. Support the city managers. So, you know, the mayor and I, if it was up to us, we'd give millions of dollars to youth programming, but we understood the city manager had to put together a balanced budget. And so we're fine with the recommendation, at least the mayor and I are fine with the recommendation you've made so far. And I think it's a good start, and there's opportunity later on as cannabis comes online for additional revenue for the city. And so that's our report. Those are our recommendations. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just in closing, two things that I'd like to bring up. Number one, when we talked, there were a lot of programs for preschool. They're impacted. There's a waiting list for a lot of them, but there's a lot of programs for that age group. When you look at the programs that we have for the teens right now, it is lacking. That age group from 12 to 18, we heard over and over again. Now, if they're there, the youth don't know about them. And so I would suggest that that's the whole. We're not coming back and suggesting let's throw money at this and figure it out. We're saying let's set money aside so that as somebody comes in and figures out what would work, there's money there to be able to work at that. The other thing, when you look at the money that's put into the budget, $350,000 in the first year and $750,000 in the second year, what we're talking about Measure W funds, $750,000 of the $15 million would be 5%. So we're talking about a reasonable amount of that money going to support youth services to really try to create things that don't exist right now in our community. And so,
Can I clarify something?
Yes.
So I had 750 here. It's 700. The 50 comes from another pot of money that we had set aside for small grants with Parks and Recs Commission. So I just threw it in there because it's specific for youth programming, our commentary about youth not feeling welcome in the community center is not a criticism of our staff. It's not a criticism of you, Nancy, because I think there are opportunities where people do feel welcome and whatnot. I think we're looking at it from kind of an after-school vantage point. Do kids go to our community center? And while in some instances that there is that. We also know that our community center is an area that we lease space out for different organizations throughout the community to utilize. So we know that impacts the ability for youth to really take advantage of the community center. So we recognize that, but by no means is it a criticism of all the hard work that you're doing to engage youth from the recreational perspective.
And our job, honestly, wasn't to argue with what we heard. It was to report back what we heard. And these are the things that we heard. In closing, I would suggest Councilmember Thorpe and I have put this together. We've also had discussions about continued work that we will bring back, put down in paper and bring back as continued work of this ad hoc committee, and what our next steps would be that we would bring forth and look to continue with another set of work. So.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, if I could ask that you get the electronic copy of your PowerPoint to the clerk's office for posting with the agenda.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. As far as mayor's comments go, I just want to